So medicine in today's generation is far different from what it was back then. Um, the research, the scientists, biologists are far much different than how it was back then, and more so the ethics that were involved back then are more different than they are now. Um, Henrietta Lacks was a African American woman, a 31-year-old to be exact, who had became ill at one point of time in her life that had led her to the hospital and sadly to her death. But that really didn't stop her legacy. Her legacy was the issue and the battle that we still are fighting now, which is a cure for cancer. In which I believe that we already have a cure for cancer, but um, that's just my thought on that. But the what really got to me was Dr. Guy, which is a scientist who was the first scientist who found this particular cancer about Henrietta Lacks, and the fact that he kept it from her family, and also the recognition of her name and how he changed her name or used codes to give Black people credit to the medical research industry, and he named it the HeLa cell, and that really spoke to me because it really kind of clarifies how the mindset is still the mindset in today's medicine and health field, how white people weren't able to give Black people credit for certain vaccines, and when in the video it mentioned the polio vaccine and how the HeLa cell was a huge contribution to that vaccine that we still encourage people to use today. And so it also is fascinating that I currently work at a hospital, and they show these different these pictures of scientists who have found this, and majority of them are white, but no one talks about the particular enzymes that you can only get from Black people to cure certain things, and how we fast go back in time, and go back time into exam one, where it talks about how you know if it wasn't for African Americans or my ancestors or these slaves, there wouldn't be such foundings that white people are getting credit for in today's generation, and still are getting credit for. Um, Another thing that was mentioned in about Henrietta Lacks was the fact that people who had cancer didn't want to talk about it. They were afraid, and more so in Black communities, um, which is true. I believe that regarding health issues, it's definitely a taboo to talk about these health issues and concerns within the Black community. Um, and so that leads to lack of knowledge within ourselves, and with our within certain traits and genetics and DNA that allows these certain diseases to really be overthrown in Black communities. Um, Another thing that kind of really stuck out to me was how Stanley Gardner, who was actually the scientist and who discovered the fact that these cells didn't just come from white people. They actually were led back to one particular cell line, an enzyme, which was a Black African American woman, which is Henrietta Lacks, and his this allowed this allowed him to expose the truth about a lot of white scientists, and a lot of the research and findings that indeed that all this research that the HeLa cell came from an African American woman. And I thought it was hilarious how a lot of the white scientists were like, no, that this didn't come from, this couldn't have come from an African American person, that they could not hold this particular unique cell line, that it had to, come from a white person. And so really it really just shows you the level of understanding when it comes to the African American body, and how um, we have not we have not done more we have not done enough research about the African American body. And maybe we have done a lot and we are, hiding the truth of certain cells and enzymes that we do carry, um, which I believe we carry powerful DNA, powerful genes that are able to conquer a lot of the issues and sickness that I believe that were started from the Caucasians. But that's a different, conversation. Um, but lastly, I really want to talk about how Dr. Guy didn't tell the family members that they were using, their mother, their aunt, their sister cells to create this great change in the medical field. And one of the members said that um, they were in shock and upset, but most importantly, how much. um you don't know how much I forgot what she said, but she said that you know you don't know how many cells they're using, or how many of your cells that they're using that you're not getting credit for. you know um when you're in these doctor visits or whatnot, and how even Henrietta Lacks didn't even know that they were using her cells to close the the findings of curing cancer. And so I think it's just like I said, really important to educate yourself and to really, be involved with what's going on within the medical field if that's what you want to go into. But if you're going to go in the medical field, I believe that as an African American, you have to educate yourself on these type of things so that when you go into these facilities that are predominantly white, um, that you are able to educate yourself, that you're able to educate, your peers, your families, and even friends of the truth of about the medical and health field. Um, and to give African Americans a reason, a more deeper understanding of why it's important that we, be in these type of spaces and be included in these type of spaces, even though they want to exclude us in these spaces. I think it's really important that we be involved in conversations that we feel mentally that we are not smart enough for. And so, um, but like I said before, I believe that there's a lot of great accomplishments and findings and breakthroughs uh, that African Americans had done, but were automatically, denied because of the color of our skin. And and that's the thing, is that we were denied a lot of recognition, not just in the medical field, but and not just in the health field, but we talk about a lot of other things, regarding the accomplishments that were done by African Americans, but were publicized by white people as if they were the true findings of medicine. Um, it also takes me back to, my anatomy physiology class where we were dissecting on cadavers that were white. And so I would try to understand why we were not doing research, or why we were not, experimenting with African Americans in the medical field. So it kind of it just kind of, like I said, it's just that you have to put yourself in these spaces. You have to also ask yourself these questions about, the health of African Americans, and not even African Americans, but the ancestors of where you are genetically linked to. Um, and that's about it. I believe that scientists like Stanley Gardner should start exposing the truth about cells and its genetics, about HIV virus, about the AIDS virus, about all these viruses that, like I said before in the beginning of my video, that were not, generated from African American slaves, and maybe they were generated from African American slaves, but it started exposing the truth about these certain cures that only come from certain, ethnicities. And so I believe that the more melanin you are, the more um, the better you will find these certain types of enzymes and genes in that will be able to cure certain type of diseases. But I feel that medicine is a lot of people that are in the medicine or the medical field are majority white, and so all they do is do research on their peers. So yeah.